And thank you for joining us for this conversation with Lizzie Bentley Bowers and Alison Lucas, who are going to be our guests in our March 17th DSM Discovery Group, where we are going to learn about caring for organizational endings. Alison Lucas and Lizzie Bentley Bowers are based in the UK. They're professionally accredited executive coaches, and they began noticing in 2017 endings in organizational life. And since endings are an inevitable part of organizational life, and most organizations invest heavily in beginnings and new starts, they often move on too quickly and can even ignore the endings in the organizations. And so Allison and Lizzie have been doing work to prepare leaders to care for these endings, so that how they care for those and lead in those times, it will create healthier organizational life and care for the people that are under their leadership. They also notice that in the pandemic, the many layers of often distressing endings just increased. And in our session on the 17th, they're going to talk about the importance of caring for endings. And they're also going to introduce us to a 4 pillars model that they have developed of reality, emotions, accomplishment, and ritual as a guide for working through the past and current and future endings. So we're excited to learn more about the model that they've created. Alison Lucas of Randolph Partnership and Lizzie Bentley Bowers of the Causeway Coaching in the UK. They're professionally accredited executive coaches, and they are passionate about staying continually curious and paying close attention to their clients and their individual and their commercial needs and outcomes. And so, Lizzie and Allison, we are so glad to have you and so glad you're willing to participate in our DSM Discovery Group.
Thank you, Fred. Thanks for having us.
Fred. We're really excited that we're going to be able to join you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. And well, we have some questions it's just whetting our appetite, to think about what we're going to learn about this aspect of organizational life that really isn't talked about much by many leaders. And so it was very interesting when I first saw you folks talking about this last fall. And so I made a note about when you were going to launch so that I could find out more about this. And so as we think about this meeting coming up on March 17th, some questions that will help us frame our understanding and learn a little more. So what sort of endings are organizations experiencing, and what is the human impact of these endings?
Thanks, Fred, and that's a great question. And what I loved in what you said in the introduction is that it's not talked about enough. And when Lizzie and I started this quest around endings, our plan was to start a conversation. So we're really grateful that you've invited us to come and continue that conversation with the DSM group. So what sort of endings? When we started this work, we could have gone really narrow and just talked about the joining and leaving. So in terms of what sort of endings, there are leavings which can be on time or off time. They can be retirements, redundancies. In the UK, we've had furlough tipping into redundancies. We can have people being promoted internally or leaving an organisation voluntarily. So there's that whole side of it. And there's also something around things like a plant closing, or many whole businesses have also closed. Could be a project that's successful and the team has been expanded, or that it's failed. So we decided to go really wide and keep it at endings, because there are so many that are happening at all times. And in a pandemic, that has only deepened, and as you said in the introduction, got more distressing. Lizzie, do you want to talk to the second part of the question, which I think was about what's the impact on leaders and us as human beings and organisations?
Yeah, I think a very broad and basic way of saying it would be it's about leftover stuff, be that emotion, be it energy. That's what Alison and I became more and more aware of, that when an ending wasn't attended to, and as Alison said, this includes things that went well. This includes the closing of successful projects. But when those endings aren't attended to well, people carry things away from it, often in the form of emotion, maybe in the form of unanswered questions, maybe in the form of something that goes on in their relationship with others, or maybe something that goes on in terms of their view of themselves. But in all sorts of ways, things are left open. And then something happens with that, where the energy, the attention, the focus on the present and the future is affected by the pull of what's been unresolved in the past. So it's, well, as Alison referred to, we were really conscious as we went towards this work that it doesn't sound like the most cheery of topics. And yet, in terms of human impact, that's why we talk about brighter beginnings, because the impact actually of attending Better to Endings is a very positive human one.
Thank you. So as I think about this, why would organizations overlook caring for endings?
Lots of reasons. Lots of reasons. And actually, Fred, as you were talking earlier in the introduction, I remembered something that Ali and I noticed, and this question about why would they overlook. Part of it is to do with the fact that it's just not really done in our experience. And one of the first things we did when we started to really have much more in-depth, serious conversations about this topic was we looked to our bookshelves and the many, many books that we both have on leadership and organizations, and there was barely anything there. So leaders and developing leaders aren't generally encouraged as they think about and start down the path of leadership or management or in business, frankly, they're rarely encouraged to look at this. So our conversations actually around this topic began when we started to talk about how we close our own coaching relationships, and how much attention we pay to that close versus how we open them. And the more we talked about that, the more we noticed how overlooked endings were showing up in our clients with the unresolved stuff we've just talked about, and how that might have been getting in their way. And then that led us to look at, why is this being overlooked? And there's a lot of challenging stuff around endings. You know, emotions is something we'll talk about. There's pain. There's not much guidance out there about where to start with this quite broad, potentially a topic that people are wary of. That's some reasons. There are many more, Alison. Are you going to add to our list a bit?
Well, I think building on what you're saying, Lizzie, about when leaders aren't taught this stuff. We now talk, Brené Brown's work about vulnerability, we talk about emotional intelligence, but actually this is something that can make people feel very vulnerable, needing to help guide others through an ending or attend to their own relationship with endings, and particularly because they are often messy. They're often about unfulfilled promise, and they often contain emotions and what people might think are going to be, our clients often come to us saying, I have a difficult conversation, and we always reframe that into, actually, it sounds like it's an important conversation. And I think attending to endings, it falls into that camp, and often it's painful, and often we have defense mechanisms which tell us not to attend to and look at things that are painful, but to move on quickly and swiftly. So I think there's the whole sort of human nature side of it, that leaders aren't taught it, that human nature is to not look at the things that are painful. And then I think organizational structures and processes often really, really get in the way. So if you think about somebody who's been made redundant, and we have here often a compromise agreement that makes it secret, and that then means other people in the system don't understand the circumstances, and they make up their own stories around it. And often HR processes that are designed to protect the organization actually don't protect the human system. They help contain that energy in the not understanding or the not moving on. So I think the more we started to get into this, the more layers of complexity there is, and we've just started to scratch the surface. So, we always say we're not experts, we're practitioners. We're fascinated by this. We're always learning more. And so the fact we're going to have a conversation with your wonderful group, I think will, enrich our practice even more, because there is so much around this, around loss and grief and all sorts of different angles that we can delve into.
And chucking into the mix on top of that, again, is the pressure of time. When time is short, and bright, new, shiny things appeal more. That's a great reason why organisations move on quickly. There's something else you reminded me of, Ali, as you were talking as well, which is that there's an assumption that if we've missed the moment, we've missed the moment. So quite often a reason that an organisation wouldn't then look to caring for that ending is that the assumption that the moment has passed. And that's one of the challenges that we want to offer in this work, is that you can do some really useful work around an ending that hasn't been acknowledged quite some time in the past, and it will release something that's useful for you or for the organisation, or both.
Yeah, and that's often the work we do with clients, that we're working with old endings that haven't been resolved. So an example is a client will often come to us transitioning into a new job, and this work is really relevant for transitioning, and say, I want to work on my first 100 days. It's a really typical place. And we often say, let's just orientate you all towards the ending, the leaving, the wrapping up, the closure of where you're going from, in order to then turn to that bright beginning. So I think that's a really, really useful point, Lizzie, that it's often not in the moment. And I think in the pandemic, where so many endings have not been possible in the usual way, that the need to think about that timing, to think creatively, to think about how can we attend to it when we can't do the normal way that we might gather, the normal way that we might attend to something. I think that's part of what made this work even more pertinent for us to be talking about now.
Thank you. So when we think about this and your 4 pillars model, how might the 4 pillars model be helpful to leaders as they care for organizational endings? Tell us about your work there.
Yeah, it's a really useful question. So I think at the most simple level, it's the fact that we have a model, the fact that there was no guidance, no handrails for people to say, okay, so how do I go about doing this? So it's really simple. It's reality, emotion, accomplishment, ritual. We have got tools and exercises, workshops that can help people work through that. So I think it's safe. I think it's a safe way for people to enter into it. It's a framework. So it's not about being right. Our measure of success is it useful? So if somebody takes it and goes, but I don't like that pillar, or actually I found doing it like this, we go, great, was it useful? Then we've accomplished what we want. And I think there's also something about, again, we see our work as coaches as balancing support and challenge in the right amount to help people move forward. And by laying out the fact that attending to reality, including the messy stuff, that there will be an emotional element, but to acknowledge whatever the pain of leaving, that there were accomplishments in that belonging in that previous organization, and that some sort of closing in a form of a ritual might be helpful, means that we help people to attend to all of it rather than the bit that they're comfortable with or the bit that they're familiar with. So I think there's a potential thoroughness to it. Lizzie, how about you?
All of that. And I would say, I guess also I'd say that what this also enables leaders to do is start with themselves, which will be reflected in the work that we do with your group. So we are pretty passionate that we couldn't expect anyone else to do work that we haven't done ourselves. And we encourage the people that we work with to take the same view, which is not to expect anyone that you work with to do something you haven't been prepared to do yourself. And the guide rail, the handrail of those 4 pillars helps us to make sure we've paid attention, as Alison said, to everything, not just the stuff that we might comfortably pay attention to. So it's about safely embracing some discomfort as well, getting to know our own relationship with endings, maybe our own blind spots with regard to the work that we do, so that then we can work out where we feel comfortable in terms of supporting others through this. And the answer to that might be no, and that's fine too. Or the answer to that might be, okay, I feel I can do this, but I think I would need support to go to this level with the work. So it's an important step for us that those pillars are used with ourselves first, and then we start thinking about how we then turn that attention outwards.
Sounds like that's very practical, hands-on work for leaders rather than just theory that they will read about.
It is very much so. I think part of our being is that we're practitioners. So born out of probably a combined 30 years of coaching, or nearly, of working with people and noticing what we notice. It's back to that, is it useful? So a model is only useful if somebody can get something out of it. So what we will be doing with the group is to tell them some of our thinking, to offer the model, the 4 pillars, and then get them experientially talking. And I know that's at the heart of what you do as well, Fred, and it feels like it's a really good match to how the group likes to work. So we will be getting people to explore with us, giving you some provocation. Okay,
so they will, sounds like the participants will have very good breakout group sessions with each other.
Yeah, we'd love to be in every single one of them, but we won't be able to. But we will look forward to the plenary when they come back and tell us the richness of the discussion.
Yes. Well, is there anything else you want to add before we close?
I think just we're really looking forward to being with you.
Yes. So again, thank you, Alison and Lizzie, for being with us today and giving us a foretaste of what we will experience on March 17th in our DSM Discovery Group. And again, if you will be watching for the invitation that will go out on March 1st, and we certainly look forward to having you and learning more about this great work that Alison and Lizzie are doing. Thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.